Hey friend, welcome to Healthy by Heather Brown. Do terms like mental health, intermittent fasting, and buzzy wellness words make you feel overwhelmed? If you don't know where to start with loving the life you already have and letting your good things grow until they become daily habits, I got you, mama. So join me as we unpack what it looks like to live a life well loved and redefine a new approach to health from the inside out. Think of this space as your girlfriend's group text with the occasional dad joke and point of view from my Yankee hubby, Eric. We promise to give you key takeaways that you can implement right away to pursue health in your mind, body, and soul, because God made us that way. Don't stress. Let's hop on this Hot Mess Express together. Holy smokes, you guys. I have been teasing this guest coming on the podcast for a while. I'm so freaking excited to have Matt Beaudreau on the show today. Matt is the founder of Acton Academy Placer and Acton Academy Sacramento. As a career educator, Matt has delivered TED Talks, consulted with universities, written books, created programs that have helped to push education into the 21st century for teens across America. He currently hosts the Essential 11 podcast and is a world-renowned keynote speaker and former kickbox fighter, which y'all know Eric's going to love talking about that. He's also the co-founder of Apogee Strong, and we are so thrilled to have him come on to talk about mentorship, relationships, specifically to boys. So boy mamas, make sure you listen up. And I just found out when I was welcoming him behind the scenes on the show, he's also married to a Heather B. So with all that said, Matt, welcome to the show.
You're dang right. That's the best part of the whole thing right there is that Heather connection, So yeah, honor is absolutely mine. Thank you for having me.
So awesome. So how long have you and your Heather been married?
This year will be 15 years married, 18 together.
Wow, yeah, that's awesome.
How about you guys?
It'll be 14 years coming up. So we're not too far behind you.
Yeah, not at all. When's when? What month?
We got married in September and we were college sweethearts. So
cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. Yeah, we're October. Very cool.
Oh, I love it. Yes. So Matt, that's quite the bio. Holy smokes. And before we got on the show, he was telling me more about his podcast. But will you just tell a little bit about your mission behind Apogee Strong, what the name means, and then tell them what the crazy fact you just told me about your podcast? Because I was like, what?
That's so funny. Yeah. So the mission of Apogee Strong. And so if your husband likes kickboxing, he'll know, yeah, I got to kickbox, I got to be in the cage 9 times. My co-founder on this, Tim Kennedy, was one of the best fighters that UFC ever had. Tim's an absolute stud. So he and I got together around building schools, wanted to help him build one of the schools in Texas that was similar to what I was running in California. And so we were sitting there having some coffee and said, man, we're doing this with the schools and this is fantastic. But gosh, I've got great men in my network. You have great men in your network. We need to be doing more collectively as a society to get good men back in front of our young men and bring back these rites of passages to manhood. What does it mean to be good, character-driven, value-driven, service-oriented young man? We got to bring this back. So let's put this together. So that's where it came from. We went with the name Apogee because apogee means ascending to the peak of something. If you're climbing up the mountain, you're getting to the peak of the mountain, you're getting to the apogee of the mountain. And because, we believe that moving into masculinity is a continuous journey. It's something I'm still working on too. I still work to get better every single day, right? Perfection's not possible, but the pursuit of perfection is possible. And that's what we say should be our standard for young men and for men as well, right? It's that pursuit of perfection in the things that matter. So that's where all that came from. And then, the podcast started out a couple of years ago called the Essential 11. And the whole premise when we started was bringing on amazing human beings who were out making an impact and having them answer questions that came from young heroes. So we've had Gabby Reese and Seth Godin and Patrick Bet-David and Gary Vaynerchuk. And the list goes on and on and on of just world-changing human beings answering these questions. And then more recently, the podcast will be actually inclusive of young people who are on there with us. I talk with the guests for a little bit, and then the young people will jump in and they'll ask their own questions too.
Cool.
So it's really, really cool. It's a really inspiring hour, and it inspired iTunes and Spotify so much that they ripped down about 150 of our episodes. Both said, we don't know, really what's going on. We don't know. So, but they didn't help me recover anything. So we've had to go back and recover all those and been trying to re-release all those along with, as well as the backlog. So it is what it is. You know what? It's work worth doing. So you're going to have struggles. Yes. It's all good.
Absolutely. Well, it's so crazy when he said that. I was like, man, a large part of the reason why I wanted to launch this podcast, it's always kind of been like a dream in the back of my brain for years as an entrepreneur. But what finally pushed me over the edge was I thought, well, like Instagram's starting to censor so much. Meta as a whole is starting to censor so much. I'm going to get on this podcast platform where at least I can have more freedom of speech, not be worried about that. And Matt's like, actually, just be aware.
Yeah, kind of crazy, huh? Kind of crazy
Yeah.
how that happened. We've had the same thing with, even payment processors and things like that, that are like, hey, because you're not saying women, you're only saying men so far. Well, then you might be some sort of terrorist organization. And so we're going to hold your payments. It's a funky world.
It is a funky world. That's a polite way to put it. It's a very
Yeah.
sin-filled world. And I think that we're just watching the moral decay of our country and what we used to place our faith in God. It's getting like stripped down to the bare bones. And I found, Matt, because as the world did start changing so much in 2020 and all of a sudden censorship was becoming a thing. And Matt, I'm really passionate about sharing about human trafficking. I feel like since I have such a prominent platform, obviously, that's built online, and I know that porn and online addictions and a lot of things play into human trafficking. And so I feel a very heavy weight that the Lord has placed in my heart to care about women and children that have that happen to them or get sucked into it. And so it's just such a touchy subject because even the church is almost like afraid to touch it. And then when I started talking about it online, I literally watched my engagement like start just like
Totally.
boom. Yeah, just insane. So anyway, during all this in 2020, I started following more accounts that were also being like, what's going on with my account? Like it tended to be more conservative accounts, more Bible believing, like kind of like what you're saying, like believing in classic roles for men and women. And it's like, what is happening here? I'd love to hear your take from 2020 going on.
Yeah, that in of itself is a big question because there's so many different avenues we can go with. And thank you for your heart in the trafficking, situation too. And we partnered with Apogee has partnered with ARC, and we're bringing trafficking awareness directly to cities. We're bringing people in, for weeks at a time to help combat trafficking issues in various cities. And we're partnering with ARC, which is a phenomenal organization, Association for the Recovery of Children. So thank you for your heart on that. So yeah, 2020 was an interesting sort of deal. So I've gotten a very unique perspective that I'm very, very grateful for. And it's kind of this weird journey of, okay, well, I was going to go into the Secret Service and I turned that down because of somebody in the Secret Service. It was like, let me pull back the veil a little bit. And here's why you don't want to, right? So I have that experience. And I was in schools, working at Stanford, working as a public school teacher, public school administrator, private school teacher, private school administrator, seeing the game of schooling and going, okay, well, that's not what everybody thinks it is either. So I've got to go build something else for my kids, right? So I had kind of that experience. I've been on stages for 500,000 people across the globe working with these big companies. Some of these bigger companies are in industries that have come up quite a bit in the news in 2020 and beyond. And so I saw behind the veil for some of those too, where I went, that's not necessarily what I would call ethical or the right thing, right? So I've gotten this unique, and I'm grateful for it, unique perspective in all these different industries. So, in 2020, I had already launched a number of schools. I already knew, and I had launched them in a way where we could not be shut down intentionally because I could see, especially in California, where things were going sideways in schooling a number of different ways that people didn't fully understand. So I had set us up in a different way. So when 2020 hit, we actually expanded while everybody else closed down. And it gave me the opportunity to start being more vocal about, hey, I've been telling some of you that this is on its way. What do you think? And so it actually has, these last few years, the silver lining has been so many previous conversations where people are now going, okay, now I'm ready to hear it. So I actually look at it as a positive, right? Because I've been saying things prior to, and now people are like, oh, now I get it. Okay, let's make a change. And they're making positive changes for their family. And so I'm excited about that part of it.
Yes. So Matt, tell people, how many kids do you have and what are their ages? I forgot to ask you that in the beginning.
Oh, that's great. No, it's no worries. I have 3 young heroes. My daughters are 12 and 10, and my young man is 7.
Love that. Okay. Well, I have a 7-year-old too, Leighton. I've got Leighton and Finn, 2 boys, 7 and 4.
Okay.
So I'm curious to ask you this question too. It's actually a large part of the reason that I wanted to have you on this podcast is I was having a conversation with my husband and I, between us and another couple. I'll link back to that show note. We had on Brent from She Gave It a Go, and her husband, Andy, he works in ministry. She does what I do, influencing full time. And we were talking about the difference between raising boys and girls, and they have 3 girls and a boy. And then we have our 2 boys. And Eric asked them, do you think it's harder to raise boys or girls? You have both. I'm curious your thoughts. And they said, well, we would 100% say girls. Like, it's really incredibly difficult. There's lots of emotions, this, that, and the other. And Eric said, I obviously can't speak to that because I don't have girls. But he said, what I will say is I do feel like there's a war on the American male right now and what it looks like to raise a manly man. And when he said that, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to get Matt on the show. And so I would love to hear your perspective on that, number one. And then number two, to the boy mamas that are listening to this, how would you encourage them if they do have their kids in regular schools and they're like, what are you talking about with the schools? What's going on?
Boys or girls, are they harder? The answer is neither. Neither of those is, and if I'm honest, neither of those, in my experience, is more difficult than the other. And it is only as difficult as we as parents decide to let it be. Ooh. And so here's what I mean by that. So there's a common thing called, oh, kids didn't come with manuals and, there's no directions and it's really, really hard. Is it hard? Yes, there are some hard parts, especially in that infant stage. You're not getting any sleep. Like there's all of those. It shifts your entire world. Now, all of a sudden your priorities have to be here, but you still have to take care of other things. So of course, those changes are difficult and you got to learn to manage time differently. There's all the emotions that come in for the husband and the wife, and they've got to learn to communicate at a higher level. Right? Because now you have something that's more important than both of you that you are responsible for taking care of while still taking care of all of your other stuff. So yes, in that regard, there is a shift. There is a leveling up that you have to engage in. That said, if you get yourself trapped in the mindset of, oh, this is going to be so hard forever, what you tend to do and what culture tells us to do, well, is outsource as much as you can. Send them over here. Send them to grandma and grandpa as much as you can. Send them to school as early as possible. Send them to daycare. Send them over here. Send them over there. We're encouraged not to work through those hard years and set a foundation that actually makes raising children pretty dang easy. So people meet my young heroes at this point and they go, oh my gosh, how do you discipline your kids? These are like adults. And I'm like, you have to hit them with the first two knuckles, right? No, I'm like, no. When I tell people at this point, we don't have to discipline our kids. We've taught them to be disciplined individuals. That's a different thing. And we have agreements in our household that we are all going to be disciplined individuals. And we're on this mission together and we're going to hold each other accountable to that. That includes they can hold us accountable to that as well. When you have that sort of relationship and trust set up and that sort of foundation, which those first few years and you really build that foundation in, after that, are there obstacles? Of course there's obstacles. There's obstacles for us as adults too, right? But their mindset is completely different. And more importantly, we have kept them away from the distractions that exacerbate some things. The teenage years for girls don't have to be crazy just because they're going through hormonal things. But if we put them in environments that are toxic, school being one, then we're going to have more chance that gets drawn out. For young men, it doesn't have to be crazy hard. They're physically active. They want to go slay the dragon. They want to get at it. Cool. Let's give them the opportunities to do that and not send them to an institution that says, oh, you're 5 years old and you don't want to sit down and listen to something that's going to bore the crap out of most adults, never mind a 5-year-old boy. Well, then you must have a methamphetamine deficiency. No, that's not it, right? We're not going to need to medicate this young man. He's not broken because of it, right? So if we're avoiding these kind of things and focusing on that foundation, man, neither has to be. It can actually be pretty dang fun. And I would encourage parents to really want that. That's not a knock on parents. I'm hopeful that that's inspiring them because, man, I love getting to raise these human beings. And I want parents to feel that way too. I
yes.
Really.
Amen.
So that's where I start with that choice.
What about the second part about people are like, okay, like, but I live in, and you live in the South too now. So they're like, I live in the South. Like, I feel pretty confident in our schools. I'm sure it's fine. What do you tell that parent that's kind of like, has no idea, which I didn't. Yeah. We're all learning. Like you said, we're trying to get 1% better every day.
100%. That's right. And most people don't understand, including, by the way, the teachers. Most people don't understand why, the big why. We're not asked to really, when I say we, I'm a credentialed teacher too. I went through the process. I went through that system, right? And you're not asked as you're going through that, what should education really be for? And why do we do school the way we do? Because there's this kind of just assumption, because we were all born into this, where school is just something everybody does, right? At this point, there is nobody that is older than the age of compulsory schooling. So we've all been born into this. So we're not asked And we don't ever really stop to think, why do we do school this way? We have this assumption that there were some sort of experts at some point that went, this is what you need to do. This is when you need to do it. And this is how you need to do it. We just kind of go along with that assumption without actually questioning, was that right? And unfortunately, when you look into one, child development, two, how schools were put together, by whom and for what purpose, you'll realize that the system itself of schooling, this isn't a knock on teachers or administrators or parents that send their kids to school. I support all of you if you're good human beings. The system of schooling was put together to create slave mentality, to create workers who could follow directions, but not necessarily carve out their own path. And they were going to go ahead and just be blindly obedient to the masses, whoever claimed to be authority for the rest of their life. That's why it was created the way it looks.
I didn't know that. That's wild.
And that's what's unfortunate is when you start going down that rabbit hole and learning that, you start to see, well, that is to create a schooled population. An educated population looks really, really different. And hey, wait, people were actually educated before compulsory schools. Yeah, actually at a higher level than we are now. So my, encouragement to parents is understand this wasn't designed for you or for your kids. So what can you do to start moving the needle the other direction? Let's just start thinking about it and taking a look. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, then great. I don't expect you to believe it, but go look for yourself. Be brave enough to go take a look and ask the questions.
First of all, I just want to say that I appreciate what you do. And I feel like it takes just a lot of courage to go against the grain and to stand up against the common narrative in general. And that's a lot of what I think drew me to your account, even though you're talking about all these manly things and, like you have the kickboxing background, all these things. But I was like, I see the value in what he's speaking here for just common human decency, which is almost now feeling like it's not the norm. But I think that, and maybe I'm wrong, but what it feels like is that the social media narrative is trying to push down the normal people so that it does feel like, well, everybody's crazy. It's just me and my family. Like you feel isolated. So how do you encourage women and or men to find community locally? Because that's one thing that I always get asked is I do feel so isolated since 2020. I'm still trying to figure out how to reconnect. Do you have any suggestions there?
I think it's an interesting question because it really begs the question when you are looking for your quote unquote tribe, right? Somebody to connect with so that you do not feel isolated. And when social media is perpetuating the narrative of that you're kind of alone, right, on this, can we use that and go the other direction? It's an interesting thing. Now that we live in North Carolina, we've been here for a little over a year. I can honestly say, even though we've been here a little over a year, we don't have a lot of really good friends here in North Carolina, partially because we live on a big farm. We had to learn farming. We are not farm people. We grew up in the city. We grew up in the Bay Area, right? So we didn't know anything about farming.
Quite the change. Yeah.
Quite the change, right? But we wanted to learn and we're excited to learn and we've been learning. So we've been taking on this process and enjoying every single minute. My kids are in activities, and so they're making friends there too, but they're not struggling at all. They're not really like, ooh, we got to have somebody here locally. I don't feel like I have to have anybody locally. My wife doesn't feel like we have to have anybody locally because we still actually have friends and family that we connect with virtually. And so it's a very interesting thing because as much as social media can isolate, I can tell you the people that I talk to on a daily basis, the men that I connect with, the women that my wife connects with, we actually have a lot of these friends that have come through social media as much as anything else. So I don't think it has to be one or the other. I think it just is going back to what you were saying, being intentional about connecting somewhere. So is it there in your local community? And do you find them through activities, through church, through shared, a lot of times I know a lot of guys will find community through jujitsu or martial arts, right? Shared things, shared values. Obviously you find through church, shared values. Homeschool co-ops are great because a lot of times you have families who have the same values. Looking for things like that locally, I think can be beneficial, but I don't think we have to totally discount the value of social media too, if you're intentional with it.
Hey mama, do you feel like you are surviving on chicken nuggets and goldfish and haven't stepped in a gym since college? Or maybe, on the other hand, you feel like you're checking every health box and are still hitting a brick wall? Well, I'm here to help you redefine what it means to be healthy from the inside out. I'm a former fitness instructor and everyday mom who is passionate about helping you create a beautiful life you freaking love. So I'm opening the doors to the Healthy by Heather Brown membership to the public and can't wait to walk alongside you and be your cheerleader. When you join, you'll be added to my exclusive Facebook group. You'll receive my Sunday reset training that will help you create promising, sustainable, healthy choices from the inside out, which will in turn lead to a more joy-filled life for busy moms. Live coaching and workout classes with yours truly. You asked and I listened. We'll talk about how to balance your whole health when you have kids and life get busy with school and activities. It includes grocery haul ideas and accountability as we all reset together each Sunday. There will be so much offered that you won't find anywhere else on the internet. Are you ready to take one step out of stress, shame, unhealthy boundaries, and fatigue and add healthy rhythms to the Hot Mess Express? When you're ready, I'll see you on the other side of the link in the show notes. I'm excited and ready to hold your hand and meet face to face. Now, Matt, so we've talked a lot about social media, and I think the biggest thing is what I hear on my DMs a lot, and I'm sure you do too, is I just didn't know that other people felt like this. Like I thought it was just me and my family, and I feel scared to say something. I'm so proud of you that you're willing to say something. And I'm like, yeah, but you have a voice too. Like if we all spoke what we thought, we would realize we're not in the minority. So how would you encourage people that are scared to start speaking out and maybe start saying things that are very countercultural?
That's so good. It's so good because you're right. So many people live in fear and don't want to voice things. And it's interesting because I think parenting plays into that. I think culture plays into that. I think school very much plays into that too, where it's just like, no, you just answer to the authority and we'll tell you what your opinion is. And, there's only going to be one right answer and you're not going to be able to speak up. And so what's happened is people have lost the ability to really engage in civil discourse. So I think a lot of the fear is because it's either way over here to the left or way over here to the right. Like I either have to say nothing, or if I say it, I've got to come out and say something so aggressively that it's like, you're either on my side or you're not. You're either in my gang or you're not, right? The reality is, at the end of the day, the majority of us probably agree on the majority of things. Even if we disagree on big things.
Right.
We probably agree on more things than we disagree on. So I always try to encourage people to start there. Start with speaking to like, hey, you and I might disagree on this. Here's where I think we agree. And we're both coming from this place, right? And even when I talk education, like knowing what I know on schools and why they're developed that way, I think a parent is sacrificing their child to the enemy. Like that's how much I believe that school is designed to bring us the other way, right?
Wow.
But I know parents aren't sending them there because they want to send them to the enemy.
Right.
They're sending them there because they think it's the best thing, because they love their kids, because they want what's best for their kids. By the way, I want what's best for my kids. I also want what's best for your kids. We agree on all of these things. Let's start here.
Yes.
And then I'll say, look, here's my side and here's my evidence to it without having to beat you over the head with it. And you don't have to agree with me, but I want you to at least hear this. I want to hear your side. And I'll listen to you, right? And I want to start with what we agree on and then go from there. And that's a harder ask than people realize, but that's where I always start, because if people will start with just that part, sometimes they get a little braver to speak more and more and more.
Oh, that's so good. Yes, I totally agree with that. So while we're talking about peer pressure a little bit, can you dig into peer pressure and how we can get our kids, specifically our sons, through that if they are in a school or, with drugs, vaping, whatever it is at the time?
Yeah. So there's one of the common pushbacks I'll get is, hey, well, your kids have to know that life, can be hard and there's bad people out there sometimes. So might as well send them to school. And I'm like, okay, so if you are wanting to get better in your life, do you go hang out in prison for a week? That doesn't make any sense, right? If I want to love, what am I doing? I'm going to go listen to a podcast. I'm going to go read a book. I'm going to go to a seminar. I'm going to go listen to stuff. Like I'm going to go somewhere that's causing me to elevate my game, right? Well, guess what? Kids aren't practicing to be people. They're just people with less practice. They're no different than us. So what do we do for our young people? We need to expose them to as much greatness as possible. So that starts with parents. So peer pressure isn't a thing if they don't feel the pressure. So if they're already thinking at a higher level, they're thinking about greatness, they've got a mission, they've got a purpose. They see mom and dad living a mission and purpose all the time. They're extraordinarily happy at home with what's going on. They feel like they're a part of that team, a part of that mission, a part of moving something forward. They're excited. They're living an adventure. And if they're living an
Yes.
adventure, then something else loses its luster, right? There's not vaping. Like, it doesn't even sound cool. Yes, we've had the conversations at home about, here's what this is and here's why this will crush you and take you off tracks. Yeah, you've had the conversations.
Right.
But more importantly, it doesn't even seem attractive because of the mission that I'm getting to live, right? And so then you're continuously, mom and dad are living the story. They're bringing that young hero along. They're lifting eyes to the horizon. Here's what's ahead. But then they're also telling stories of other people who live that way too, right? We've lost the ability to put heroes up in front, in the media or in movies or in books or in music, putting heroic stories up there for us we connect to stories as humans.
Yes.
So but movies portray victims, media portrays victims and the victim mentality. And that's what's trendy. And that's what's put on a pedestal, right? So that's what they're now looking to as on the horizon. And then they have mom and dad who are like, I hate my job. Money doesn't grow on trees. And they're like, it seems very unattractive to be an adult,
Right. Yeah, totally.
So,
Eric is going to love that quote you just gave about victim mentality. That is like his biggest soapbox. He cannot handle it.
It's such a big issue, right?
It
But we're
is.
putting that on a pedestal. We're making that a new value. And so our young heroes have that kind of value being put in front of them. So, man, some sort of distraction starts to look more attractive because it's like, man, at least I can get out of this nonsense for a little bit, right? So they've got a mission and they have amazing humans around them and they're hearing these stories and they're consistently being pointed towards hero stories. The things that are distractions, they aren't even attractive.
Yeah.
People can't believe that my 7-year-old boy has no desire to play video games, really. I'm living it.
That's
Like,
awesome.
why would I care to go do a virtual, right? And again, that's so important, especially for you, if you're raising these young boys, please understand that's a God-given DNA. We want to conquer. We want to go slay the dragons, man. We want to go fight the battles. We want to go rescue the princess.
Yes. Raising Boys, the book.
Oh my gosh, we want to do that so bad. But then if we get shown, okay, well, we can do it in the safety of your own home. And here's how you live this adventure through a controller. You're like, well, this is easier because I don't have to actually do anything in public. If I fail, I get to, cool. Well, then that absolutely leads to turning the volume down on what you do in real life. That virtual box check that you can do through video games. So it's like, well, how do I do this with relationships? And we know how to get that with relationships too, right?
Yeah.
And these are real issues. And by the way, this isn't just me spouting off. This is me 2 decades working with young human beings. And I'm hearing it straight from them. I deal with it day in and day out, just with the parents, with the young people themselves.
Yeah.
Right? It's a real issue. So
absolutely. So what does it look like to shape a family that is countercultural and teaches boys to be God-fearing men? Like if women are listening to this and they're like, oh, I didn't lay the foundation. My, 10, 11, 12-year-old boy is always stuck in video games. How do you kind of encourage them to break that cycle?
Yeah. How do you encourage the parents to break the cycle? Because it's theirs. That's their cycle.
Yeah, for sure.
It's the parents' cycle, right? So the parents have to get their stuff together first. The hardest part of parenting is making sure you're doing the right thing in your own life. That's the hardest part of raising any young people, is making sure you're dialed, because they are going to become who you are before they become anything you tell them they can be. So you got to do the work first. So that's the hardest part, right? So they're the ones that put the video games there. They're the ones that bought it. They're the ones that are allowing it. They're the ones that are setting that standard at home. You make normal what you make normal. It is normal in my household for my 10-year-old daughter to ask me a question. Like she asked me a question a few months ago. She's like, okay, so I'm listening to all this stuff about the Fed printing money. If the Fed just prints money all the time, anytime they want to, well, then why are they so concerned about taxing everybody else? And I posted something about that on social media and somebody's like, I'll take something that never happened for $500, Alex, because in their mind, that's not something a 9-year-old could ask. You know why? They don't set that standard. In our household, that's a normal conversation. In our household, my kids look at the P&Ls of my business. In our household, my kids understand our trust structure and the cash flow of our family and how things work. That's a normal conversation for us. Talking about what's on reality TV or what's going on, like that's not normal for us.
Yeah.
Right? When
that's
parents
so good.
have these kids playing videos, they've made it the norm. So you've got to start shifting new norms. And in order to do that, you've got to be inspired, and you're going to have to figure out how to inspire them as well. So you've got to get together on a mission as a family and have family agreements, not you need to get off the video games. No. We together need to go after something here. And that means, yes, mom and dad are going to hold you accountable for moving towards this mission. You're also going to get to hold us accountable for moving towards this mission.
Yes.
I always tell people we have 11 rules in our house. It's a family contract. And that family contract is how the Beaudreau family looks at the world and operates within the world, which means if dad is missing the mark on any one of those 11 at any time, any of my children or my wife can go, hey, this is how we do it.
Right.
Going on.
Refer to number 4.
Refer to number 4. Right. Number 6, no complaining, fix it. You sound like you're complaining. I don't hear a solution, Dad. What does that look like? And I have to go, yep, you're right. Okay, let me come with a solution. Otherwise, I need to stop this because that's not how Beaudreaus live their life. So,
Matt, do you have a link to your 11 rules that I can put in the show notes for people to see?
I don't have a link to anything. I'm in the middle of writing a book around it now, but I'll send it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I can send you a list of the 11. And what I tell people too is that people will send the list before we've gone through the 11 on podcasts. Every once in a while, what I want people to understand is those 11 are highly, highly personal to us too, right? So if I say one of our rules is to be a copycat, people go, okay, well, that's stupid because cool. This isn't yours. This is ours.
This is mine.
Family, and there's a specific meaning around that term for us. Here's what it means, right? It's copying the patterns of success that have been laid out by other human beings, right? So if you see somebody who is living a way you want to live or doing the things you want to do, well, there was a roadmap for them to get there. So let's take a look. Let's understand what that roadmap was. And let's find the bullet points. How can we copy that roadmap, not become them, copy the roadmap so we can potentially take a look at some of the same opportunities, right? Like that's what that means to us. Yeah. So that's why that language is there. So I encourage families to create yours that makes sense, but I'm writing a book on all of those and how to extrapolate all of those into moving your families forward.
That's super cool. I know we're running short on time, so I'm going to change the subject a little bit. We're recording this ahead of time, obviously, you guys. So when you hear this, it won't be as recent to you. But in Nashville, not too long ago, we all know what happened at Covenant School. And we all know that, there is a crisis in our culture around masculinity. So do you mind sharing just a little bit about what are some ways that we can start calling behaviors toxic and childish without associating it with masculinity? And is there anything that you think like people, I say the word like influencer or like people with influence, but every person listening to this, you have influence because you have a social media platform, you have friends, you have family, you go to a church, people. What are things that believers from the ground up can do to start changing this narrative around toxic masculinity and what is becoming such a loud voice from 1%?
Yeah, it really is. I want everybody to get in the fight, but think about what you're fighting. You're either going to fight against something or you're going to fight for something else. And each one takes the same amount of energy, right? So I think we spend a lot of time fighting against the narratives that are continuously coming out. And so we're in a very reactive mode, right? Where we're fighting against this and fighting against that and fighting against this. Now we got to go, what else? What's the next thing to fight against? When we should turn around and go, what can we go fight for? How do we go make the voices louder of, hey, look at this young man and what he is doing here that is changing the world. Let's put a spotlight on him. I did the same thing as far as schools. I can battle what schools do all day long, but that's a form of just complaining. Or I can follow my own rule number 6 in the house and fix it, right? So I could spend my time fighting against something that's not going to change, or I could spend my time fighting for the change that I want to see. And I started creating schools of my own and inviting other people along. So in any of these things, rather than fighting against something and that narrative and putting ourselves in there, let's fight for, here's what great character-driven, value-driven, service-driven young people look like. Here's what they're doing. Here's where you can find them. Let's highlight them. Let's spotlight them. Let's have more of them. Good leaders create other good leaders, not followers. So anybody that's influence Like you said, everybody's got it. So influence other people to continue to lead as well. That's what we need to be doing.
And Matt, you brought up such a good point. We've been talking about, like kids, they're going to follow what you do. Well, you can't expect your kids to surround themselves with great people if you don't do the same thing. So
100%.
I would just highly encourage you guys to force yourselves outside your comfort zone and connect with people either online or in person that do force you to level up. Like, to me, inviting these people on the podcast that I respect, like Matt, that's forcing me to level up, because I'm like, he's going to bring the heat and he's going to bring new and challenging concepts to me, but I'm not afraid to ask questions and I'm not afraid to be challenged. And so I want to challenge you guys today. If you listen to this and you feel challenged by it, screenshot it, tag me and Matt, and tell us what you're going to do today to make an impact, what story you can highlight, how you're going to level up your life today. Because it's a day by day choice, truly.
What you just did was you called people out as an educator would. I always differentiate between teachers and educators. And educators will do exactly what you did. They want to inspire curiosity, continue to ask good questions, right? I don't expect anybody listening to this, they don't have to believe a word I have just said, but I do expect them to go look it up and see, was I right? Was I wrong? Do you agree? Do you disagree? I'm okay with all of those.
Yeah.
As long as you take the action. The opinions of 10,000 men mean nothing if they don't bother to look at what you are doing and what you're talking about and actually take a look at the evidence. Doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So you called people to be curious, and then you called them to then take action and do something else. Those are the two things. If people would switch back into that, switch back into curiosity mode, ask the question why, and then be willing to take a step forward, we would drastically change the society we are in.
Woo! I'm like, that'll preach right there. Thank you, Matt. That's awesome. Well, I have one last question I ask all guests. So why don't you tell everybody where they can find you, and maybe like what your favorite resources you have out right now, so I can link it in the show notes for them.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Right now, so we're redoing an entire website with a documentary attached, which is going to be great. It's going to put all of our programs under one spot. But until then, we've got a very basic Apogee Strong programs.com. And that will point you to whether you want the young men's mentorship, the dad's mentorship, the home education course, the parenting course, all of that stuff can be found under there, as well as the foundation. So we have a 501c3 where we can scholarship young men to attend our programs, to go attend the schools that we're building, to come out to live events. We can use those scholarships to help, what we're doing with ARC and the trafficking. So really, ApogeeStrongFoundation.org is another great place to go. And I'm probably most active on Instagram at my name.
We will link all that. And then my final question for you is, what are some ways that you consciously reset, Matt? I talk a lot about my Sunday reset and how I use that to set myself up for success as a family and for my mind, body, and spirit health, and recharging your life right now. And it can be anything that makes you feel like you.
You know what's cool is my family really is the reset. They really are. And so I love what I get to do. And I feel like I am on a God-given mission. So it's very easy for me to work every single day. It's not a hard thing for me. And I tend to want to put myself in that scenario, but I understand that that's not what I need to do as well to be effective. So I make sure I am very much in control of my schedule. I have a very specific stop time every single day where I just go and I just sit with them, whatever they want to do, wherever we want to go with it, whatever that looks like. That is what recharges me so I can get up the next day and be fully ready to rock and roll to serve others as well. So it's very easy for me.
That's super awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on the show today. And thank you as a mom of boys and from a couple that values people like you willing to speak out. Thank you so much for all you do.
Honored, truly.
Absolutely. All right. Well, you guys, like I said, please screenshot this episode, share it to your stories, tag me and Matt. I will put all the resources we talked about in the show notes. You guys have a beautiful day and go get bold out there. If y'all think I'm a little crazy, just wait till my favorite guest joins me in the marriage corner. It's my hubby, Eric. Welcome back, girl gang. Get ready. I asked Eric to do this for me as a personal favor.
All right. So Heather asked me to come on and she said, Eric, you have got to listen to Matt's interview first. Now he has a UFC background, kickboxing. And she said, Eric, is there any way you could do a UFC intro? And I'm like, well, there is this guy named Bruce Buffer, and he always starts the UFC fights. And when it's the main event, he comes on and his big tagline is he introduces the fighters and he goes, "It's time for the main event." So I'm sorry if that was very loud. And I'm sure I did not do that justice at all. But I think that I'm most excited about starting this conversation about this podcast you did with Matt, because it really did speak to me. And you were so enthusiastic about the interview. you're very enthusiastic about all your interviews, but you said, Eric, I think you're going to really relate to this. And I think you're going to have a lot of points. And I thoroughly enjoyed the interview and I can't wait to discuss it.
Yeah, for sure. So we don't actually normally even do this on the podcast where we discuss the episode prior in the Marriage Corner. But I've been following Matt now for probably close to a year, maybe a little bit longer. And I've sent several of his things to Eric, like, oh, I think you're going to like this post he did, or, whatever the case may be. So then when I had him on the podcast, I called Eric like on fire. Like, I was like, this is awesome. I can't wait for everybody to hear it. Like, it's going to be so good. And I was like, is there any way you'd be willing to listen to it early so we can talk about it in the Marriage Corner? And Eric was like, if you're this fired up about it, sure, let's do it.
Most definitely. And I listened to the entire interview. And I guess one of the first things that stuck out to me about Matt, and I almost feel like I can just call him by his first name because he just seems so relatable. I just felt like there was something different about him, the way he spoke, the confidence he had. And, this isn't to toot my own horn or your own horn, but I know people say this about you and they'll say this about me at the hospital at times, but I'll talk to a patient or things of that nature and they'll kind of say that same thing. They're like, there's something different about you. And, sometimes I'll go into my faith and that's a good opportunity to talk about that. I noticed that same genuineness, that same contentment, that same confidence when Matt was speaking about the topics that are close to his heart. And you can just tell that that really is Christ in him. And I think that's the same thing for you and me. And like I said, this isn't to toot our own horn, but a lot of times when you are around people that are believers, I do feel like there is something different about them. It's hard to put your finger on it at times, but it is a contentment. It is a genuineness. And I could tell that about Matt.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I also actually told Eric when I got off the phone with Matt for the podcast interview, I said, he reminds me a lot of your dad, Eric. So Curtis A, we jokingly call him Curtis A. But Kurt is very much so a positive energy too, where you'd be like, how was your day, Kurt? And he's like, oh, every day's a great day. And that was kind of the type answer that Matt got. And I really love that perspective. And I know that I often challenge you guys listening to this as well as myself to have a no complaining day or a no complaining week. And I really do think that that goes far as well.
And kind of going off of that same topic, that was one of the things that stuck out to me later on in the interview was him talking about his 11 rules that his family lives by. I thought that was great. I can't wait for when the book comes out. But one of the other things that you guys touched on at the very beginning was you asked him the question that I had asked our friends, is it more difficult to raise boys or girls in your opinion? And I really liked his answer, which was neither. And I think that's a mindset change in that you're not looking at it from a negative point of view, but you're looking at it from a more positive point of view and to really take ownership in the raising of your children. And I think at times we do fall in the trap of what are the difficult aspects of being a parent as opposed to what are the joys of being a parent? What are the responsibilities and take ownership in those responsibilities? So I really liked the way that he answered that question and framed that question. I also have to say, like you said in the interview, I was hooked when you mentioned, kickboxing, former UFC fighter with Matt being in the cage 9 times. His co-founder, Tim Kennedy, like he mentioned, one of the all-time greats he's fought. This was like hit home to me because I've seen his fights against Yoel Romero. I've seen his fights, which he was robbed on, by the way.
Make your husbands listen to this episode for real, girl gang.
So, he's beat Michael Bisping, who was a UFC champion. Tim Kennedy is an all-time great. He's doing great things with the military as well, too. So I was hooked as far as that is concerned. I guess a couple other things. I just wrote a bunch of notes while I was listening to the podcast because so many things stuck out to me.
So let me comment on that before you say the next thing that stuck out to you. One thing that I was just talking with actually at our Bible study, and a girl is actually starting to sub some Hoover High School. And she said, y'all, kids are not the way that they were like even a few years ago as a teacher and just from when we were growing up. And she was talking about just how the schools, are forming these kids and what the culture looks like and how different it is. And she said, we obviously couldn't have cell phones out in class because, well, first of all, we had Nokia bricks. But she said, Heather, these kids have their cell phones out during class, in between classes. They're all scrolling TikTok. They all have their earbuds in. They're not connecting one-on-one with people. And she was like, and then you think about, she said the cuss words I heard in the hallway were astounding. Like she said, I try to leave at least 5 minutes early every day because it's so scary walking the hallways now. That really struck me after this conversation I just had with Matt Because I think a lot of times you think, like I said, that you're in the South and you're in this, quote unquote, great school system, but it's just eye-opening. My eyes were like, whoa, after hearing all this.
I hear similar stories as well, too, amongst our friends who are teachers or around children a lot, just how things are different, expectations are different. And when you said that, it made me think about what Matt had said about really taking ownership as a parent. And it made me think to myself the question, what really is causing parents, specifically men, to shirk their responsibility of being a parent nowadays? And I think there's a lot of different factors. I think there's so many distractions in the world nowadays, whether it's like you mentioned when you guys were talking, whether it's video games or it could be, things such as even pornography. But, another thing that I thought about as well, too, there are a lot of seemingly pressures on men. And some of those, include, paying bills, you got your mortgage, you have paying for, if you private school, all the things going on with school, extracurricular activities. It could be saving for your retirement. And I think a lot of men, they almost get overwhelmed with all of these responsibilities. But then also, too, we talk about this a lot. I'm a big believer in perspective, and it's really easy to, and you guys talked about this as well, too, is talk about that victimhood mentality. And if you take a big picture perspective view, men nowadays and people in general have it better than they have ever had in any history, in any generation. We have it better. Just a few generations ago, people would wake up and think to themselves, how am I going to survive today in the USA?
Yes.
In the USA, there are people that definitely have those hardships, but for a majority of people, they do not have to worry about that. Instead of worrying, how am I going to survive today? We get to worry about how am I going to thrive today? And that's a completely different mindset. And if you have that mindset, all these other pressures that you have on you that maybe are causing you to shirk from your responsibility, whether it's bills, money, marriage, all these different things. If you take a big picture perspective, they really pale in comparison. And whenever I'm able to take a step back, it allows me to refocus and really think to myself, all right, let's do this,
Yes. And I think that one thing that I have felt convicted about recently, and I think that as moms, you'll probably relate to this, is that I actually think that even though the boys come home from school each day, or even on the weekends, a lot of times they are playing outside, which is great. I absolutely love that for them. I want them outside playing with their friends. And I know you're never going to be a perfect parent, and there's grace for that. But one thing that I felt a lot of, I guess, disappointment in myself maybe is that I am almost like shirking the responsibility, though, of still having those one-on-one conversations with my boys, or being like, yes, I want you to go outside and play, but I'm going to go play with you because that's my time that I have to invest in you. Now, do I think it's my job to entertain them all the time? Absolutely not. Do I think they should play outside with their friends some? Absolutely, yes. But I think that I've almost taken advantage of the fact that I have said no iPad, during the week, and I'm sending them out to play all the time. But then I'm almost removing myself from being their primary truth teller of having real conversations, getting into their day. And I do think, Eric, I'm really proud of us. They only do soccer practice and soccer games, and they have swim. They're not in a ton of activities. But I think I just want to be more intentional about the time that they are home from school. Me being the primary one pouring into them and speaking things into them versus other kids that are, not believers or just different, things are prioritized in their home.
So I definitely agree with you, but I also want to encourage you to give yourself grace as far as that is concerned, because one of the things that also stuck out to me in the interview is kind of how Matt talked about boys in particular. They want to be heroes. They want to slay these dragons. They want to go on adventures. And I was actually just talking with my dad. I grew up in a relatively similar environment where we had woods behind us. And I just remember going out in those woods and creating all these different adventures in my mind. And our boys nowadays have a zip line that they have been obsessed with in one of our neighbors' backyards. And I definitely think there's a time and place to have those intentional conversations with our boys. And that was another thing that I was going to ask you about later on in the podcast, about specific things that we can do as a family that kind of Matt touched on as well, too. But I am more than happy, and I'm so thankful that our boys have friends. I don't want to know what they're doing out there. I really don't. I want them to push boundaries. I want them to get hurt. I want them to take risks, and I'm so happy that they have that opportunity. And I think one thing we need to do as society is really, we try and protect our kids from every hurt, every slight. And you know what? When that gets into the real world, we're not going to be there for them to protect them all the time.
Mhm.
And I would rather, like Matt said, implement those expectations and those standards now as far as learning, getting hurt, dealing with kids, other kids, different interactions. Those are all critical aspects of growing up, in my opinion.
Yes, I would agree with that. And I think yesterday, because I've been thinking about this conversation so much, and again, it's like what Eric and I decide and what Matt and his family decide, like everybody's has to be different and normal. You have to figure out what works for your family. But the thing that I figured out yesterday was I thought, okay, I know Eric's not going to get home from work until late tonight. So I just thought, like, I'm going to let them play outside until 5:20. And then I'm going to cut off my work. And then I'm going to tell them, hey, come inside, quit hanging out with the other kids. And me and them are going to go walk over to a creek or to a park or something. And we just marveled in the outdoors. And like they got wet. They crossed over. They built quote unquote dams like the beavers do over creeks. And Finn almost fell in the water. Shocker. And so it's just really cool to get to like walk and talk and then experience outdoors with them. And it just felt like I was really excited about the way that perfect balance played out yesterday. Obviously, every day can't be like that, but I was excited to almost think like, how can I make that a priority at least a few times a week?
For sure. And one of the things that you just touched on is that everybody's family is different. I think sometimes it's very easy to compare ourselves to other people and try and have these big ideas and do all these things. But you know what? Just being a good dad and being involved with your own children's life is enough. One of the things that Matt talked about was, instilling these servant hearts, service in community. And that's going to look different for each person. You could be a community speaker. You could go to local rec halls and do that. For me, one of the small things I do is I coach our kids' soccer teams. And I love to do that. I love to play soccer. And one of the other things you guys spoke about was the victimhood mentality, which, like you mentioned in the podcast, that's one of the biggest things on my mind right now is how easy it is to get into this victimhood mentality. And one of the things that I try to instill in these young kids, it really is this cliche. It's not about whether you win or lose. I want them to win, and teach them how to win. But really it is about how you handle loss. Because if you lose and you have that victimhood mentality, that's just doubling down on a victimhood mentality. And I would rather have them learn from losing, figure out what can I do to get better. And that was one of the big things that stuck out to me. But being a service to your community can come in many different forms. And even if you're just a servant to your own family, that is enough.
Amen. I definitely agree with that. I'm glad you made that point. And I will say too, that I really like how Eric, when you are coaching, I also think Eric does a really good job at the end, having the kids even say who they think played really aggressive that game or played really well and not just making it about me, me, me. And I think that that's also a really cool habit that you're instilling in those kids from a young age.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
I think one of the other things I thought about was different types of leadership because each person is so different. There's people that are introverts. There are people that are extroverts and how people get their energy. And if you look back in time, and one of the things Matt talked about was he's trying to highlight these different heroes and leaders in society. And I'm sure he would probably agree. There are many different leaders that were actually fairly soft-spoken that, whether it was through just example or could be more silent protest. But then there's also huge leaders that are more extrovert that you think of your classic, military leaders, things of that nature. But leaders really do come in all shapes and sizes. And one thing that I would like to do is I think dive more deeply into how do we cultivate these leaders, especially with children that have different personalities, because not every child is going to be your prototypical leader with this big extroverted personality, come follow me, but how do we get these more soft-spoken children, which that's just how God made them. How do we give them confidence to be leaders as well too?
Yeah, I really, really like. I do think that actually part of what you're saying though, is that's part of your parental responsibility too, is to figure out ways to make your kids or at least assist them in thriving and understanding where their identity comes from. And, that God calls them to serve him and that they can be servant leaders. And I think actually your dad did a really good job of that too with you guys. So
Big Kurt, he comes through like a champ.
That's what our kids call Kurt to say, Big Kurt.
So I've got one final question, just kind of based off of your interview for you. But have you thought about any practical ways of the things that you spoke about with Matt that maybe we could implement into our family and what that may look like?
Yeah, I definitely have been thinking about this a lot. And I really like also how Matt kept saying, you may not agree with me. You don't have to agree with me. But what I'm asking you to do is to think about it and do the research and not just accept the status quo. To me, that is like one of the biggest life lessons that I feel like me and you have even like taken on since 2020. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So I think that I really want to figure out what are ways that we can instill that questioning into our kids. And I also was thinking about how I really would like to do more adventuring. Like, I think when we asked Leighton, what is the big thing you want to do before we go back to school last year? What did he say? He wanted to go hiking at Red Mountain. Like, I think just pushing them outside of just the norm, like going to the park, but like instead we're going to go on this hike or go try to see a waterfall, or maybe we start mountain biking or going out to a farm, learning about different things. I want the boys to feel that constant adventure.
I think those are huge. And it's interesting you said that as well, too, because it just piqued to my mind. I read a recent study as well, too, or I read an article about a study talking about how good just being outdoors is for children nowadays, and how they've done studies on children that have ADHD, done studies where they get them outside into green spaces. You'll see the improvements as far as behavior and just all these other different factors. And then also, too, I think the study did tie in changing diets and eliminating processed foods. I really wish I had that study in front of me right now to reference.
We can link in the show notes.
It really goes to show, I really am a big believer in what you just said, getting outdoors. If you can, change the diet, decrease the amount of processed foods in your children's diet. But being outside, it just offers opportunities to have more discussions as well, too. And not so much in a formal setting. I guess the one thing that I was going to say as far as how do we instill some of these thoughts and ideas into our lives practically was, I guess it was just more about being intentional. And I was thinking about things, and we've tried these things before, whether it's something like Family Friday, where we sit down and maybe we discuss a certain topic that's going on in today's society. I think sometimes as parents, we're afraid to talk about current events or our specific values because we're trying to shield our kids from all these worries. I think there is something to be said for that, but I also am a big believer. And as I get a little bit older as well, too, I don't want to shield my children from the hardships or the worries. I would rather have them be tough, resilient children now, understand what's going on, be set in their moral grounds, then later on them having to struggle with that themselves. Obviously, we're always going to be there for our children, but I would rather set that foundation now than later on.
Yeah. I also really was intrigued to hear what you thought about what it could look like, to how he talked about disciplining his kids with like, we're all self-disciplined. How do you think that could play out in our family? With a 7 and 4-year-old, I'm like, that's different grounds to think about,
Well, I think it goes to, once again, holding each other accountable. And if you sit down and discuss whether it's Matt's 11 rules of his family, like he said, it's different for each person. His 11 rules aren't going to be our 11 rules, or we might have 3 rules or 5 rules, whatever it may be. Mm-hmm. But I'm a big believer in holding each other accountable, because if you do it in the right way, like we say, time, place, and manner is so important. It really is important to hold each other accountable, and for children just to learn the importance of constructive criticism, that I'm not doing this because I want to be mean to you. I'm doing this because I love you and I want to hold you accountable. I want you to be better. And as they get older, these kids, they're going to get criticism from their boss. They're going to get criticism from their friends, from their loved ones. And it's really important to learn how to deal with that now and take it in a positive as opposed to a negative. So I'd rather have those conversations now.
I agree. And I think that it really does, to me, it made me think about how am I going to be more of a proactive parent versus, I think sometimes when I am being lazy, I can be more of a reactionary parent.
For sure. And I think it's very important to try and be proactive as opposed to reactive. And I know we both fall into that trap sometimes, but that's something that we can both practically work on, I think.
And hold each other accountable. And look at that, already working on it.
All right. So last question. Are you ready to move to North Carolina and be by Matt and start a co-op with him?
Let's do it. Eric knows I want some chickens. I want some chickens real bad.
All right. We're coming. Let's go.
Come on, Matt. If you get a horse, we're sold.
That's right.
All right. Let's be honest. I'm probably not leaving Birmingham, Alabama anytime soon, but maybe get some land a little bit outside and have my animals.
It's okay to have options.
That's right. Options. All right. You guys have a great week. Don't forget to screenshot this episode, post it to your stories, and do what I challenged you earlier with Matt. And then my next thing is I'm going to challenge you today to send this to your husband and ask him to listen so you guys can discuss it too, because it was really fun, not only to hear it, but then to get to hear Eric's take on it too. So let us know how that goes. Y'all have a great day.